The first days of the year aren't just dates on a calendar. They act like a silent code that tells your brain and your life how the next cycle will be lived. The problem is, most people enter the new year repeating exactly the same habits as the year before. They wake up the same way, think the same way, react the same way. Then they wonder why nothing changes. Abundance doesn't respond to promises made at midnight. It responds to decisions made at the start. There's a huge difference between wishing for a prosperous year and acting like someone ready to receive it. And it's precisely in the first 3 days that you set the energetic, emotional, and practical tone for the entire year. I learned this the clearest way when I realized that the years I started with intention, clarity, and conscious choices were the years I grew the most, not just financially, but in peace, opportunities, and security. It wasn't a coincidence. It was alignment. If you want 2026 to be a year of real abundance, these first few days need to be lived differently. Before we go on, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and stay with me, because what you do now can completely change how the new year responds to you. Step 1. Consciously declare the end of the old year. Most people walk into the new year carrying the old one on their backs. Unresolved emotions, unprocessed frustrations, broken promises, quiet guilt. And that's heavy, because nothing new enters a life that hasn't been internally closed. Abundance doesn't coexist with emotional baggage. I learned this the year I decided to do something different. Instead of just raising a toast, I sat down alone and wrote everything that needed to be left behind. People, habits, versions of myself that no longer matched who I wanted to become. It wasn't pretty or light, it was honest. And that honesty created an internal space I had never felt before. Ending a cycle isn't denying what happened. It's acknowledging it, thanking it for the lessons, and letting go. When you don't end cycles consciously, you repeat them unconsciously. And that applies to money, relationships, self-esteem, and choices. The first day of the year needs to mark an ending, not just a beginning. When you truly close a door, your energy stops looking backward and starts looking ahead. That's when your body relaxes, your mind clears, and the field of abundance starts to open. If you want to attract abundance in 2026, start by declaring, "It ends here." Comment, "I release what doesn't move me forward." This phrase seals the end of the old cycle and prepares the ground for everything that comes next. Step 2. Start the year by organizing what you've been avoiding. There's a reason why so many people avoid organizing their lives right at the start of the year. Facing the mess hurts. It hurts to look at numbers, unresolved tasks, unkept promises, and postponed decisions. But abundance doesn't enter where there's confusion. It needs clarity. And clarity begins when you stop running from what's disorganized. I remember exactly the year I decided to start differently. Instead of making grand plans, I started by cleaning up the basics: finances, calendar, environment, priorities. I opened statements I'd been avoiding, wrote down everything I owed, everything I earned, everything I spent. At first I felt ashamed, then I felt relieved, because the pain of facing it was way smaller than the pain of staying in the dark. Organizing isn't about controlling everything. It's about taking responsibility. It's telling life, "I know where I am," and only those who know where they are can choose where to go. When you start the year with clarity, something shifts internally. Anxiety lessens. The feeling of being behind disappears. You feel like you're in charge, even if not everything is solved yet. Abundance doesn't like constant improvising. It responds to order, to respecting your own time and resources. And when you organize what you've been avoiding, you unlock energy that was stuck in fear. If you want to attract abundance in 2026, face what you've been avoiding. That's where the key is. Comment, "I choose clarity, not avoidance." This phrase marks the moment you take control of your new year. Step 3. Decide how you want to feel throughout 2026. Most people start the year thinking about what they want to achieve. Few stop to consider how they want to feel. And that changes everything. Because your daily decisions aren't guided by goals, they're guided by emotions. If you don't define how you want to feel, you end up living on autopilot, reacting to whatever happens, accepting whatever shows up. I learned this the year when, despite achieving big things, I felt empty. I had checked off my goals, but I was constantly tired, anxious, always waiting for the next bit of relief. Then someone asked me a simple question. What emotion do you want to feel every day? I couldn't answer. And that's when I understood what was missing. On the first day of that year, I chose 3 emotions: safety, lightness, and clarity. And I started using them as a filter. Before accepting an invitation, I'd ask myself, Does this bring me closer or further from those emotions? Before making a financial decision, I'd think, does this build security or anxiety? Little by little, my life started to realign. Not because everything became perfect, but because I stopped betraying myself emotionally. Abundance responds to internal alignment. When you know how you want to feel, you start making better choices. And better choices are the fastest path to a prosperous life. The first days of the year are the ideal moment to set this emotional compass. It's what will guide your actions even when motivation fades. Maybe you've already noticed that. No matter how good your intentions are at the start of the year, there's one area that keeps stealing your peace: money. Not necessarily due to immediate lack, but because of constant insecurity. That feeling that you always have to hustle, that you can't afford to make mistakes, that any surprise could knock you down. That's heavy. And it weighs even more when you're trying to build a new cycle. But the foundation doesn't feel solid enough to support the abundance you want to experience in 2026. Many women enter the new year craving lightness, but carry around a worn-out relationship with money, full of fear, guilt, confusion, and self-pressure. And as long as that relationship doesn't change, no intention holds up for long. Because it's hard to trust the future when you don't feel safe in the present. That's exactly where the Wealth Code was born. A guide created to transform your relationship with money from the inside out, in a simple, accessible, and doable way. It's not just about earning more, but about building security, clarity, and peace of mind. About leaving survival mode behind and stepping into a space where you can choose your path with more calm, autonomy, and confidence. If you feel ready to start 2026 without that invisible weight, and want to build abundance with more ease and awareness, the link to the Wealth Code is in the first pinned comment. Step 4. Make a symbolic decision that marks the beginning of your new phase. Every deep change needs a marker, something that tells your subconscious, from this point on, I'm not the same. Without that symbolic gesture, your brain sees the new year as nothing more than a continuation of the last. And abundance isn't born from automatic continuity, it's born from conscious rupture. I learned this the year I realized that just wanting to change wasn't enough. I made lists, I set goals, but inside everything stayed the same. That's when I decided to create a simple but powerful ritual. I chose one decision to represent my new phase. I ended a draining commitment. I changed how I handled my money, and I said no, where I had always said yes. That decision didn't change everything overnight, but it changed who I was when making decisions. Symbolic decisions work because they speak the subconscious's language. They break old patterns and create new internal references. It can be something simple: breaking a habit you've kept for years, rearranging your space in a new way, writing a goodbye letter to your old self. What matters isn't the size of the gesture, it's the meaning behind it. When you make a symbolic decision in the first days of the year, you anchor your identity in the future you want to live, and that shifts how you act without needing to force it. Abundance responds to clarity of positioning. When you take a stand internally, the world responds externally. Comment: I mark the beginning of my new phase. This phrase seals the moment when you stop waiting for change and start creating it. Step 5. Reset your relationship with money right at the start of the year. Many people start the year wanting more money, but keep relating to it the same way, with fear, anxiety, or neglect. And that creates a silent paradox. You want abundance, but behave like someone who's expecting scarcity. The first days of the year are crucial, because that's when you teach your brain how money will be treated in the months ahead. I realized this the year I sat down, for the first time, to look at my finances in the first few days of January. Not to blame myself, not to punish myself, but to understand. I wrote down everything: what came in, what went out, what gave me a sense of safety, and what triggered anxiety. It was uncomfortable at first, but deeply freeing. For the first time, I wasn't running from money. I was facing it. When you start the year facing your financial reality with maturity, something shifts inside. Money stops being a fuzzy problem and becomes a tool. You feel more grounded, more in control, more like an adult. And that inner shift directly reflects in the opportunities that show up. Abundance doesn't respond to vague wishes. It responds to conscious responsibility. When you reset your relationship with money in the first days of the year, you establish a new standard, one of respect, clarity, and security. It's not about having a lot right now. It's about building a solid foundation to support what's coming. Comment: I choose a healthy relationship with money. This phrase anchors your decision to build abundance consciously throughout 2026. Step 6. Choose consciously what will receive your energy in 2026. Every year starts with the same illusion, that we'll have unlimited energy. But the truth is, your energy is limited, and whatever you give it to grows. The first days of the year are decisive, because that's when, even without realizing it, you define what's going to drain you and what's going to nourish you in the months ahead. I understood this the year I started feeling burned out before February even arrived. I had entered the new year saying yes to everything: favors, commitments, conversations, and responsibilities that weren't mine. Without noticing, I was repeating the exact pattern from the year before. That's when I paused and asked myself a simple but uncomfortable question. Does this deserve my energy? From that moment, I started filtering. Not everything needed an immediate response. Not every conversation had to continue. Not every invitation had to be accepted. And the more I protected my energy, the more clarity I gained. My focus improved, my decisions got firmer, and my anxiety dropped. Abundance doesn't grow in a fragmented life. It grows when your energy is focused, well-directed, and respected. Choosing where you place your attention is one of the most powerful acts of self-care, and also of prosperity. If you start the year without setting boundaries, it'll end up draining you. But if you consciously choose what deserves your energy, the year starts working in your favor. Comment, "My energy is sacred." This phrase seals your commitment not to waste your strength in 2026. Step 7. Adjust your identity before adjusting your plans. A lot of people start the year making lists, goals, and resolutions, but they stay the same person who couldn't stick to them the year before. And that leads to frustration. Because it's not the plan that fails, it's the identity that doesn't evolve. Abundance doesn't respond to what you write on paper. It responds to who you believe you are when no one's watching. I lived this for a long time. I'd start the year full of goals, but deep down I still felt small, insecure, doubting my ability to sustain a prosperous life. And whenever something started going well, I'd self-sabotage, as if that reality wasn't meant for me. That's when I realized I had to stop trying to change my life without changing the identity that held it together. In the first few days of one particular year, I decided to do something different. I wrote down who I was becoming, not just what I wanted to achieve. I wrote simple but strong statements. I am a woman who knows how to manage. I sustain growth. I don't retreat when abundance shows up. And I started acting like it, even when it scared me. When you adjust your identity at the very start of the year, your decisions change automatically. You begin to choose differently, speak differently, show up differently. And life responds to that new posture with opportunity, clarity, and growth. It's not about forcing yourself to change. It's about allowing a new version of you to lead the year. Comment, "My identity supports my abundance." This phrase anchors the person you're becoming throughout 2026. Step 8. Make a non-negotiable commitment to yourself. There comes a point when abundance stops being about techniques and starts being about internal integrity. It's when you realize it's no longer about what you want. It's about what you're able to uphold. And that only happens when you create commitments that don't depend on mood, motivation, or outside validation. I learned this the year I realized that my biggest issue wasn't a lack of ability. It was a lack of consistency with myself. I'd make promises and break them. I'd plan and then postpone. I'd say this time it's happening and then back out. And every time I did that, my self-confidence shrank. That's when I decided to change one simple thing. I made a small but non-negotiable commitment. Something I'd do every single day, no exceptions, as a sign of respect for myself. At first it felt strange, too small, but over time, that commitment became identity. I started to see myself as someone who keeps her word, especially to herself. And that quiet shift changed everything. Stronger decisions, less self-deception, more financial and emotional clarity. Abundance grows where internal trust exists. When you trust yourself, you stop settling for less than you deserve. And when you stop settling, life reorganizes. The first days of the year are the perfect time to make this internal pact. Not with the world, with you. Comment, "I keep the promises I make to myself." This phrase seals the beginning of a stronger, more mature, and more abundant relationship with yourself. Step 9. Make a decision that benefits your future self. There's one simple question that separates people stuck in survival mode from those building abundance. Does this help or harm the woman I want to become? Most people live only for short-term relief. What solves now, what comforts today, what avoids discomfort in the moment. But abundance begins when you start choosing with your future self in mind. I learned this when I realized many of my financial and emotional struggles came from decisions made to relieve the present, even if they sabotaged tomorrow. Impulsive spending, saying yes out of guilt, postponing rest, ignoring boundaries. It all seemed small in the moment, but piled up like an invisible debt I always ended up paying later. That's when I changed my decision-making filter. Before saying yes or no, I'd ask, does this make life easier or harder for the woman I'll be in a few months? And that question changed everything. I started saving money even when I wanted to spend, saying no to invitations that drained me, investing time in what would give me long-term returns, not just instant pleasure. Thinking of your future self isn't about self-sacrifice. It's about self-respect. It's about realizing you deserve to end the year feeling more secure, lighter, and more whole than you began. When you make decisions aligned with the future you want, the present starts to realign. Anxiety drops, clarity rises, and abundance begins to build, consistently. Comment, I choose with my future in mind. May, this phrase marks the moment you stop improvising and start building 2026 with intention. Step 10. Declare internally that 2026 will be different because you will be different. There's a moment when change stops being a plan and becomes a decision. Not a loud one made to impress others, but a quiet, internal, non-negotiable decision. It's when you stop asking the year to be different and start owning that you will be different, no matter the circumstances. I felt that moment clearly during one of the most transformative years of my life. It wasn't on December 31st, not during a celebration. It happened in a simple moment, alone, when I realized I no longer wanted to repeat the same story. I didn't want to just survive and hope something external would change. That's when I said to myself, quietly but firmly, I'm not going back to who I was. And that decision changed everything. When you make that declaration with truth, something shifts inside. You tolerate less, postpone less, abandon yourself less. Your choices start reflecting that new internal agreement, and the world responds, because life always responds to those who take a stand. The first days of the year are powerful for this exact reason. They amplify the intention you hold. If you walk into 2026 decided to be different, abundance finds space to show up, not as luck, but as the natural result of your choices. It's not about controlling everything. It's about not losing yourself. Comment, 2026 will be different because I am different. This phrase seals the most important commitment of all, the one you make to the woman you're becoming. Attracting abundance in 2026 isn't a wish made at midnight. It's a stance you take in the first days of the year, closing cycles, organizing what you avoid, choosing how you want to feel, marking a new phase, resetting your relationship with money, protecting your energy, aligning your identity, building real commitments, thinking ahead, and declaring your transformation. These 10 steps don't just change the year, they change who you become throughout it. And when you change, life changes with you. If this video resonated with you, leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and drop a comment saying, I choose abundance in 2026. Because abundance doesn't begin on the calendar. It begins with the decision you uphold when no one's watching.